Escaping from Eden, Chapter 6, The Great Re-Emergence. As I go through each of the chapters, I want to do just that. I want to read the chapter for itself without any or very little extra commentary, because I want to save my thoughts on everything for the very end. I really want you to just get the picture of what Paul went through as he was writing this, and just hear what he had to say in his thoughts, his understanding, his revelations, as I read each of these chapters. And then at the very end, when all is said and done, I'll give my commentary. So don't be alarmed that I'm not saying too much extra stuff. I intend it to be that way. I just want you to hear his words, his thoughts, and what he discovered. And then at the end, I'll share my 2 cents. So here we go. The Great Re-Emergence from Chapter 6. And I got to tell you, I really do appreciate this book. I'm looking forward to reading the second one, and I still have to get my pre-order in for the third one. So, and spoiler alert, I have completed the book, but it's a good reread, and I'm glad I'm reading it for you so that I can catch things that I missed initially when I read it the first time through. So, one more time, Chapter 6, The Great Re-Emergence. Picture a world shrouded in darkness and engulfed in water. Its surface is peppered by a few scarcely habitable islands, sparsely populated by a handful of species from before the cataclysm. This world of darkness and water is the canvas for creation as we find it depicted by Genesis, by the Mesopotamian tablets, and also in a Mesoamerican document called Popol Vuh. Popol Vuh, the People's Book, is a creation account from out of the ancient Mayan culture of Central America. Let me describe this almost blank canvas. The darkness is an atmospheric canopy of ash and soot. The waters are the sea levels raised by unimaginable volumes of water released by the melting of an ice shelf 2 miles thick, which had previously covered the northern half of the planet. A growing consensus among experts today is that this was the appearance of much of planet Earth following the impact of the Clovis Comet on the Laurentide ice sheet above the Great Lakes, just as Earth was emerging from an ice age. A black sedimentary layer all over North America, South America, Western Europe, and the western part of Asia bears dramatic witness to an ensuing conflagration encompassing hundreds of thousands of square miles, followed by catastrophic flooding. The canopy of dust and soot that resulted from the wildfires then blocked out the sunlight over the northern half of the planet. Coupled with the cessation of the warming Atlantic current due to the invasion of meltwater into the ocean, the combined forces plunged the world almost overnight into an ice age even more severe than before, one known as the Younger Dryas Cold Period. It was a dramatic and super rapid transition of climate, marked by the kind of flash freezing that famously could freeze a mammoth mid-mouthful. As the ice sheet melted, it is estimated that sea levels would have risen between 40 and 60 meters, submerging any coastal habitations. In recent years, a number of researchers have uncovered evidences of the Clovis Comet, ELE, and a new consensus is building. In 2007, Richard Firestone, a staff scientist at the Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, put the theory of the Clovis Comet impact squarely on the map when he found micro-sized balls of metals, or spherules, and nano-sized diamonds in a layer of sediment dating 12,900 years ago at a dozen different archaeological sites in New Mexico. Firestone put these forward as evidence of a massive comet exploding midair and impacting various sites, extinguishing the prehistoric Clovis civilization of North America and sending into extinction 75 to 80% of the continent's megafauna. It is estimated that 36 species, including mammoths, mastodon, woolly rhinoceros, and saber-toothed tiger, went extinct through this event. In 2017, The University of Southern Carolina's Albert Goodyear published a study confirming Richard Firestone's earlier findings. Goodyear had been researching the question of the disappearing of the Clovis civilization for more than 30 years. Professor Emeritus James Kennett of the University of California is one of a growing body of academics who support the view that it was this comet or asteroid impact that triggered the Younger Dryas period and all its extinctions. The academic establishment can often be slow to embrace new discoveries and perspectives, so the growing acceptance of the Clovis Comet ELE is noteworthy. It is also intriguing to note what else was happening in other parts of the planet at the same time. A number of city-states seem to have been stopped in their tracks. Göbekli Tepe, an ancient feat of civil engineering in modern Turkey, was very carefully filled in with rubble to protect it from something, perhaps an unfolding cataclysm? A maze of subterranean tunnels stretching from Scotland to Turkey testify to a time when people lived underground, presumably to avoid uninhabitable conditions on the planet's surface. In the seas around Malta, India, and Japan, the remains of engineered structures appear to predate the timeline of our current civilization. In the Gulf of Cambay on the west coast of India, divers studying pollution levels in the bay discovered the ruins of a city at a depth of 36 meters. Subsequent studies have revealed sandstone walls, a grid of streets, and the remains of a seaport. The city, named Dwarka, correlates with a metropolis previously only known in Indian mythologies. On the island of Malta, there are stone vehicular tracks which begin on the land and extend into the sea to depths of around 30 meters. Off the coast of the Japanese island of Yonaguni are pillars, terraces, pathways, and guttering at a depth of 36 meters. All these structures were constructed on land which would have been above water no more recently than 12,000 years ago, prior to the last ice age. All testify to older, forgotten civilizations. The Clovis Comet is itself named after the civilization, the study of whose remains on the continent of North America led to the comet's discovery. These archaeological finds and other besides raise the same question. Might it be that between 12,900 and 11,600 years ago, the human race had to bounce back after a cataclysm so world-changing that it nearly wiped us off the planet? What would the memory be of human beings living on the fringe of that catastrophe? Post-freezing, fire and flood, famine and refreezing. What help would those refugee survivors have needed in order to rebuild their lives? First and foremost, for any kind of normalcy to return, the dark canopy of dust and soot and ash shrouding the light of the sun would need to be cleared. The floodwaters would need to be defended against, the habitable land reclaimed. The land would need to be rehabilitated for life on the surface, for the cultivation of crops and the husbandry of livestock. As the powerful ones went about these tasks, the surviving human population on these isolated pockets of land would see first the sun, then the moon, and then the stars. Next would be the re-emergence of useful land, then vegetation and animal life. In short, the emergence of the world as we know it would be remembered much as the story goes in the first chapter of Genesis. Furthermore, a significant clue remains in the Genesis text as we have them today that suggests what we are reading is actually the account of a recovery of the planet and a recovery of life. Within our conventional reading, this clue would give the appearance of another anomaly. However, once we reframe the story and read our creation text through the lens of a global relaunch, suddenly this verse makes perfect sense. The clue in question in the story of Genesis 1 is that before any work of creation has begun, the earth already exists, covered in water and shrouded in darkness. How can the earth exist, and water, and even darkness, before light, before the sun or stars? How can there already be an earth, already covered in ocean, before the first word of creation has been spoken? The Hebrew words describing the state of the planet tohu wabohu, imply a chaotic, empty wasteland. Is it possible that the text is showing us Earth post-cataclysm, flooded and shrouded in dust and soot, just as in the ELE extinction level event that wiped out the dinosaurs? The picture painted by Genesis 1 matches exactly what we would expect to see if a superior species landed on the planet to help the human species bounce back after a global catastrophe. The primordial step that would have to be the separation of salt waters from fresh waters for drinking and agriculture, along with the clearing of the atmosphere to allow the sun to drive all the natural forces that fuel life on Earth. Step 2 would need to rehabilitate tracts of land for habitation and cultivation. Step 3 would have to be the replenishing of animal and human species. In short, the recovery sequence would be remembered in exactly the way that Genesis outlines. The themes of darkness and the separation of waters, and the motif of the earth already existing when the powerful ones arrive and begin their work are recurring themes. They are a thread which ties together the Mesopotamian accounts, the biblical narratives, and, as I mentioned a few moments ago, the Mesoamerican mythology of Popol Vuh. The Popol Vuh document was discovered by a Spanish Dominican priest by the name of Francisco Jimenez in the early 18th century. It was a tradition maintained by the indigenous priests of the feathered serpent, and which Father Francisco translated into Spanish from the Mayan dialect of Quiche. Popol Vuh is another family's photo album, and the experience of flicking through its pages raised my eyebrows even higher than when I first sat down with the text of the Mesopotamian tablets. The text of the cuneiform tablets make for percussive and dense reading. The Popol Vuh is astonishingly clear. In its pages, the parallels are clear as the narrator addresses the question of exactly who came to nurture the beginning of humanity and the world around us. The Mesopotamian tablets say it was superiors who did this. My reading of Genesis says it was the powerful ones, and I have argued that those narratives represent the intervention of two extraterrestrial species. This is the story told by Popol Vuh. Quote, "All was immobility and silence. In the darkness, in the night, only the Creator, the Former, the Dominator, the feathered serpent, those who engineer, those who give being, hovered over the waters as a dawning light." End quote. Once again, creation begins in darkness, with entities hovering over the waters. What a fascinating correlation with the language of Genesis 1. And note that they are plural entities, those who give being, those who engineer. And what do they engineer? First comes light or dawn, then humans emerge or re-emerge. The word in the text of Popol Vuh can be translated as, quote-unquote, turned up, or showed themselves. While human beings show themselves, the engineers are, quote, in the darkness and in the night, holding counsel on the production and growth of trees and creeping vines, of sentient beings and humanity, end quote. In Genesis and Popol Vuh carry memories of what was in reality a global recovery. Somehow it is easier for my small brain to conceive of a superior species assisting with that. For me, it is a stretch to imagine multidimensional beings with the power or technology to form planets or solar systems. Of course, that speaks nothing to its possibility, only to the limits of my imagination. However, for an extraterrestrial civilization to visit the Earth and be involved in helping human beings get their footing back on the planet, assisting with flood defenses, cultivation of crops, and husbandry of livestock, these are things that we human beings do for one another in the wake of natural disasters. Perhaps the engineers who came and hovered over the floodwaters of Earth and held counsel about the planet's regeneration arrived in exactly that way, whether it was at the time of the Clovis Comet ELE or a cataclysm even further back in human memory. Could it even be that such interventions may have occurred more than once to aid humanity on its way? Genesis, the Mesopotamian tablets, and the Popol Vuh all tell a story of ongoing involvement from the powerful ones or sky people, engineers to bring humanity into being, finesse it, and ensure its survival. We are so used to thinking of the human race in planetary terms as being the top of the food chain that it is a difficult, imaginative leap to conceive of ourselves as mid-level players in a wider cosmic community of intelligences. It is hard for us to imagine human beings as the ones being experimented on, whether nurtured, interfered with, or even engineered by another intelligence. However, if you thought the Sumerian story of a council of superiors engineering us to slave for them was somewhat far-fetched, just listen to what Popol Vuh has to say. In these verses, we eavesdrop on the engineers' conference after they have engineered various animal species on Earth. Quote, "Let us try again. Let us make those who will be our avatars and those who will bring our food." So the engineers determined to make man. Of red earth they molded his flesh. End quote. The verses of Genesis echo the "let us" and molded from earth details. The Mesopotamian tablets repeat those same motifs along with the purpose of the human being to serve the powerful ones, superiors, engineers, and supply them with food. Quote, "But when they had made him, they saw that it was not good. Man had been endowed with speech, but had no intelligence. Again, the engineers took counsel. And it was now decided to make man and woman, but the result was not at all satisfactory. They existed and multiplied, but had neither heart nor intelligence, nor memory of their engineers. They led a useless life and lived like the animals. They were but an attempt at humans." End quote. This human-like population is then attacked, dispersed, and nearly extinguished, save for a few of their descendants who now live in the forest as little apes. It is curious that this near extinction is achieved through attacks by animals and by a flood. More curious still is that the Popol Vuh identified the remnants of early versions of humanity with small, ape-like creatures who live in the forest. The creature narrative of Popol Vuh put forward this connection centuries ahead of Charles Darwin and what we know as the story of evolution. Quote, "Once more the engineers conferred, and the Creator and Former made 4 perfect men. They had neither father nor mother. Neither were made by the ordinary agents in the work of creation, but their coming into existence was the result of an extraordinary miracle, a direct intervention of the Creator." End quote. Quote, "Now the engineers could look upon beings who were worthy of their origin, the 4 progenitors of the human race, strong and good-looking. They had clear sight and saw all things, great and small, on earth and in the heavens." Quote, "But this did not please the engineers. They had overshot the mark. 'What will we do with humans now?' they said. 'They have become like gods. They have understanding. They will not want to remain subordinate. They will want to make themselves equal to us. Let us therefore limit their sight.' So they breathed a cloud over the pupil of the human's eyes, and their sight was darkened." End quote. Another curious coincidence is the interplay in the story between 2 powerful entities. The CEO in Popol Vuh is named as Heart of the Sky. This corresponds with the Air Lord Enlil of the cuneiform accounts. In Popol Vuh, the first officer is named as Feathered Serpent. Quetzalcoatl, or Totalor in Mayan versions, or Kukulkan in the Inca stories. The feathered serpent mirrors Enki, the first officer among the Council of Superiors in the Sumerian tablets, and his animal association with the snake of Genesis. In Popol Vuh and the cuneiforms alike, it is the first officer whose initiative upgrades the humans to their final form after a number of experiments. Greek mythology echoes these same themes in the account of Zeus and Prometheus. Zeus is the CEO who lives in the elevated superiority on Mount Olympus. One day he learns that Prometheus, one of the gods ranking below him, has unilaterally upgraded humans' capabilities, specifically in technology. Like the serpent in Genesis, Prometheus is considered a wily trickster at odds with his CEO. Like Enki in the Sumerian tablets, Prometheus is associated with wisdom, science, and technology. Like Enki and the feathered serpent of the Popol Vuh, Prometheus is associated with the hands-on work of upgrading humans from a primitive animal state. Zeus considers the final upgrade of human beings at the hands of Prometheus as being unwise and potentially threatening to the proper order of gods and humans. Accordingly, he requires Prometheus to downgrade the human's intellectual ability to reinvent the technologies Prometheus had allowed them. He then punishes Prometheus with eternal torment just to make his point and reestablish his authority. Once again, in the Greek version of the story, it is the CEO who orders the re-lowering of human capacity and the lower-ranking entity who is credited with the now-lost upgrade. It is an odd motif to find repeating from culture to culture. The repetition cannot be coincidence, but how are these accounts connected? In Popol Vuh, the first officer so involved with the development and upgrading of human beings is depicted as a feathered serpent. So it is intriguing to find beings with large, strong, human-like bodies with scaly skin, feathers, and bird-like heads figuring repeatedly in the stone carvings and written mythologies of many cultures around the world. Borosius's Greek account of Babylonian mythology depicts scaly Oannes and the Apkallu. Similar figures appear in the lore of Bolivia, Ecuador, India, Tibet, Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, and in the art and literature of the Mayans, Aztecs, and Olmecs of ancient Mexico, all carrying the same mysterious bucket or handbag. In the case of the snake power of Genesis, Enki of the cuneiforms, and the feathered serpent of Popol Vuh, all are involved in progressing the human experiment and specifically in upgrading the intellectual capacities of human beings. Perhaps the most significant pattern that repeats across Genesis, the tablets, and Popol Vuh is that the emergence of modern humans is portrayed as the outcome of a series of experiments resulting in a gradual stage development. Popol Vuh describes the creation of people from white and yellow corn. The Mayans were the people of maize. In the past, people read this motif as pure metaphor, nothing more than an artistic flourish, reflecting the veneration in which the Mayans held maize, honoring its importance to their existence as a people. Recent research adds another layer of importance to this agricultural connection. Without doubt, the development of maize as a farmed grain was critical to the establishment of Mayan civilization. But the picture now emerging is of a deeper and far wider significance. 20 years ago, some research was undertaken by scientists at the Agricultural University of Norway in Oz, Norway, and the Max Planck Institute in Cologne, Germany. They found an area in the Fertile Crescent near the Karakodag Mountains in southern eastern Turkey, where a whole number of cultivated foods all made their first appearance, and within a very short time of each other. These foods included wheat, barley, peas, lentils, broad beans, chickpeas, grapes, olives, flax, and bitter vetch. Close by was the evidence of the earliest domestication of sheep, pigs, goats, and cattle. Bruce D. Smith, director of the archaeobiology program at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, said of the discovery, quote, "It is a remarkable congruence of plants and animals, all domesticated in a relatively small geographic area very early, a remarkable jackpot," end quote. No one knows who first cultivated these plants. The researchers speculate that it may have been a single community, perhaps a single family, who first stumbled on the idea of agriculture. The team's analysis of the parent plant's DNA found that it took a modification in just one or two genes to transform the ancient wild wheat into a useful crop, and that was enough to start the first regular cultivation of plants. All these innovations appear to have occurred in this part of the world at about the same time, just as the last ice age was drawing to a close. Farming certainly sprang up quickly in other places too, and not long after the changes in southeastern Turkey. But the sudden appearance and tight localization of the change in these particular plants points to an incredible sequence of technical advance which is hard to explain. The leader of the research team, Manfred Huhn, at the University of Norway's Department of Biotechnological Sciences, spoke about the findings to Science magazine in 1997 and said, quote, "I cannot prove it, but it is a possibility that one tribe or one family had the idea," end quote. Maybe, or did we have help? Look at that timing. This sudden progress in the cultivation of crops, allowing the development of cities and advanced civilization, occurred just after the last ice age, in that critical recovery period when things could so easily have gone another way, and when humanity desperately needed a helping hand to get going again. Before we get too stuck into that moment, we need to keep in mind that this incredible leap forward in agriculture was the beginning of our civilization, not of all civilization. Under the seas of India and Japan, buried in the rubble of Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe, and hidden in the canyons of the Clovis people's territory in North America, lies the evidence of previous technological civilizations arrested by some natural disaster long before the community at Karakadag began to cultivate the foods we still eat today. It is disturbing for us to acknowledge that advanced civilizations like our own can be extinguished. The last ice age reminds us that climate change can do it. The Clovis Comet ELE reminds us that cosmic factors such as asteroids or solar flares are enough to do it. In the 20th century, our current civilization learned how technology can do it. All of these may have happened in our long-forgotten past. The book of Ecclesiastes says, "What has happened before will happen again. What has been done before will be done again. There is nothing new in the whole world. Look," they say, "here is something new." But no, it has all happened before, long before we were born. No one remembers what has happened in the past, and no one in days to come will remember what happens between now and then. Ecclesiastes 1:9-11. If we really believe that past civilizations have been snuffed out just like that, I wonder if we as a civilization would live a little differently. If we believe that our civilization is as vulnerable as previous ones to random impacts of interstellar objects, would the technological imaginings of movies like Deep Impact and Armageddon need to become technological fact? Would developing our spacefaring capabilities become a higher priority? The famous astrophysicist Carl Sagan wrote, quote, "Since in long run, every planetary civilization will be endangered by impacts from space, every surviving civilization is obliged to become spacefaring, not because of exploratory or romantic zeal, but for the most practical reason imaginable, staying alive. If our long-term survival is at stake, we have a basic responsibility to our species to venture to other worlds." End quote. What if we believed there was nothing we could do about the fragility of our existence? Would we reprioritize the sharing and development of new technologies to get us off planet? Would we give more thought to our quality of life as a civilization? Would we invest more into our way of being and our relationship with the eternal? Without doubt, ours is a very vulnerable civilization. You and I are daily dependent on all kinds of technology that we know how to use, but which neither of us can make. Put each one of us in a post-apocalyptic world, and we would quickly find out how many basic technologies we would need help in recovering. Today, archaeological sites and artifacts demonstrating older, forgotten civilizations are painting a picture in which the creation of agriculture in Karakadag is not a story of origins, but a story of recovery, of re-emergence of Homo sapiens from near extinction. If ever there was a time that humanity needed a helping hand from interstellar neighbors, it would surely have been that moment. The testimony of the Sumerian and Babylonian mythologies is that it was the helping hand of the sky people that modified the crops and gave human society the technical know-how to cultivate them. In the Babylonian tablets, a female from among the sky people teaches the humans to cultivate plants and gives them bread and beer, two foods that result from cultivated grains. The Popol Vuh speaks of the creation of the people who are made from maize. The Mayans were the maize people. Another echo resounds in the creation story of the Zulu people, which praises a female god, Mabab Mwana Waresa, for helping the first people to establish themselves. She does this by teaching the first community of people how to farm and how to make beer. The coincidences begin to pile up. The sudden genetic modification of grain at the same time as the sudden appearance of early civilizations poses an intriguing chicken and egg kind of question, and that this should happen in the crucial time of humanity's great re-emergence, post-cataclysm, was a discovery that caught my eye. It made me wonder about the longevity of memory and how it resurfaces in our storytelling from generation to generation, from culture to culture, from mythology to fiction to film lore. It made me wonder if our ancient creation myths are in fact the scars of ancient traumas, a strange fusion of what we remember and what we have forgotten. And it made me wonder if even the most florid metaphorical-sounding language of narratives like Popol Vuh might contain a greater depth of memory than we have ever imagined. That is the end of Chapter 6. Peace and blessings to you all.